Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Spath, and I'm the Executive Director of the Indiana Center for Middle East Peace in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I also have the good fortune of knowing both of our interviewees fairly well, as I'm on the board of the Friends of Hebron with Issa, and I'm on the board of ICAHD USA with Jeff. A reminder that tomorrow, Thursday at 12 noon Eastern Time, I'll be interviewing the other Nobel Peace Prize nominee from Palestine, Mazen Kumsiya, from the Palestine Natural History Museum and the Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability in Bethlehem. So that's tomorrow at 12 noon Eastern Time. To prevent Zoom bombing, we're going to do our best to keep you muted, to keep your screens muted, so that we also block out any ambient noise. I've got lots of questions for both Jeff and Issa, but if you really want to ask a question, please do that via the chat function at the bottom of the screen. We can't promise we're going to get to all the questions, but we'll be monitoring the chat room, and if possible, we'll try to get a couple of them asked. Finally, like all of our webinars, we're recording this webinar, and it'll be posted in the next few days in two different places: on our Indiana Center for Middle East Peace YouTube channel, as well as on the ICAHD YouTube channel and on their website. So you can find it in a couple of days on either one of those places. Issa Amro, by the way, Issa will be joining us in a minute. He was here and then he left to break the fast because of the iftar, during Ramadan right now. He'll be joining us very shortly. You can see his name on the screen. Issa Amro is a Hebron-based Palestinian activist committed to nonviolent resistance against Israeli genocide. He's the founder of Youth Against Settlements and Friends of Hebron. Last year, the New York Times called him the Palestinian Gandhi. Jeff Halper is a Jerusalem-based political analyst and activist. He's the founder of the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions and co-founder of the Palestinian-led One Democratic State campaign. And Jeff is a previous Nobel Peace Prize nominee. It's significant that Issa and Jeff are being nominated together for the Nobel Peace Prize this year. And so I want to just acknowledge that they're being jointly nominated by Ingrid Fiskaa of the Socialist Left Party in the Norwegian Parliament. And so we really want to acknowledge Ingrid for her courage and her foresight and wisdom in nominating both Issa and Jeff together. So we're going to welcome Issa in just a few minutes. And Jeff, I see you. Welcome from Jerusalem. While we're waiting, go ahead, Jeff. Say hello.
Hello, everybody.
Yeah,
Good to
great.
be
Jeff, while we're waiting for Issa, because I do have a number of questions for you together. But I know that yesterday, as soon as you heard, you ran right directly to the Educational Bookshop in East Jerusalem, a place where many of us on this screen have been and consider it a home away from home in East Jerusalem. What can you tell us about what you experienced yesterday with the Munas, our friends the Munas, in East Jerusalem at the Educational Bookshop?
Well, I got an alert because Al Jazeera actually had, as soon as it happened, Al Jazeera broadcasted. So, I picked up on that and I ran over. It's true. And Ahmed was there, one of the owners who had been arrested in the first time a few weeks ago with his cousin Mahmoud. And everything was closed. He was sitting outside because what he told me was the police came. Again, no, they don't tell you why. In other words, they came into the shop, they were very aggressive, much more even sometimes in a way personally than the first time, because they started to push people around, push people out, including his elderly parents who were there. And again, began to go through books and take books. And, they kept asking, what are you doing? Why are you, what's going on? What's the reason why you're here? And they simply wouldn't answer them at all. They said, just shut up and get out. And then they took some books, and then they arrested Imad, who was also one of the family, who's one of the owners of the shop. I took him to the police station, and when I got there, Ahmed was sitting outside because the police had then locked the educational bookshop and taken the keys. Uh, so I stayed for a little bit, partly in solidarity, partly to see if something else was going to happen. And then I left. So what I heard afterwards was that Imad was released. And as far as I know, there's no charges or anything. Seems to be a campaign of intimidation that's going on, and it's very hard to convey the amount of suppression that people feel, the Palestinians, not only in East Jerusalem and obviously in the West Bank and in Gaza, but also inside Israel. Palestinian citizens of Israel are feeling a tremendous amount of intimidation, suppression, in a sense, a message of zero tolerance. Almost like what the police were saying to the Muna family, the Israeli government is saying to the entire Palestinian community of Israel and beyond, and that is shut up. We don't want to hear from you. Zero tolerance, and we'll come down on you with a ton of bricks for anything you say, for anything you write, for anything you do. So that it really is, I think, a part of a wider campaign of suppression that links to the campaign of pacification that we'll talk about in a few minutes.
Okay. Thanks for that update, Jeff. You were there, you were right there, so it was important, and we're going to be there on our tour in May to see our friends the Munas. I'm going to ask this of Issa too when he gets back, but let's talk a little bit about there's Issa. Issa, welcome. Good to see you. You're muted still, Issa.
Good to see you too. Thank you for organizing this.
There you are. Well, good. It's good to have you and Jeff together with so many of both of your friends. I hope that you're able to see so many of them on the screen. I was just about ready to ask Jeff, so I'll ask both of you. You've been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize together. And of course, I mean, each one of you is deserving of the nomination in your own right. But I'd like for each one of you to share with us what it means to you that you are nominated together. Issa with a Jewish Israeli resistor, and Jeff with a Hebron-based Palestinian activist. So Issa, why don't you begin? Are you there still?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, good. That you were nominated together. What does it mean to you? Issa,
it means that we can. It means that we can do peace together, and we can make a change together, and we can resist together, and we can send a message to people all over the world that Palestinians and Israelis can work together to make a change based on freedom and justice and equality for the Palestinian people, and based on ending the occupation, ending the Israeli apartheid, and ending the Israeli ethnic cleansing. Jeff and many other Israelis, they work hard to support the Palestinian rights, to end the supremacy, and to end the ethnic cleansing. We can do it together, so we deserve to be awarded Nobel Peace Prize and other prizes. For me, it's not about the prize itself, It's about the idea behind the prize, that peacemakers from the civil society, from the grassroots, who are paying high price, they deserve to be nominated and they deserve to win the prize. Not only the presidents, not only people who are from very big organizations. That's my answer about your question, how I feel. And I'm very proud of Jeff. I'm proud of his politics. We don't agree 100%, but we have a lot in common. And we think that we, both of us, we can make a change together.
Thank you, Issa. Jeff?
Well, of course, it's an honor for me to be nominated with Issa. Issa, by the way, people haven't, I just noticed this the other day, actually won a prize more important than the Nobel Peace Prize last year, and that's the Right Livelihood Award, which is considered the alternative Nobel Peace Prize that really is given to people that are much more political, I think, than the Nobel Peace Prize. So that I think that's something we should acknowledge as well. And of course, to be nominated with Issa is really meaningful because Issa is one of the most courageous of the resistors. I mean, in general, to resist, takes a lot of courage on the part of Palestinians. But in Hebron, which is like probably one of the worst, of the worst, as Issa will tell us, and many of you know, to be able to sustain that kind of resistance over all these years is really something that is has to be acknowledged. I think it's also timely that we've been nominated together because I think the message, not only this fake liberal message of an Israeli and a Palestinian and coexistence and how nice, but in fact the idea that there are two resistors, anti-colonial resistors to the Zionist settler colonial project being nominated. That means that there's a recognition in a way that an anti-colonial campaign has comrades from all the different communities. So it isn't this kind of liberalish just acknowledgement thing. And so I think Issa is right. This could be a very important platform for us to get our political messages out, like tonight, beginning with you, Mike, and this webinar. So I think it's very meaningful on a personal level. I think on a political level, that we've been nominated together.
I want each one of you to talk about your own work. In many ways, your work overlaps, but in some very significant ways, each of you has carved out your own particular form of activism and resistance. Issa, you're in Hebron. Whenever I've been there, the last time was last March with you. The situation was tense. The settlers are more rabid there, confrontational. You're under intense scrutiny. There were soldiers following you around, snipers on rooftops, intense scrutiny every minute of the day, and with recent threats on you. Jeff, you're in Jerusalem, and while you've been targeted and arrested many times over the years and have been an activist protesting home demolitions, participating in the Gaza flotilla and the like, your activism has taken the form of an analyst challenging us to work toward a political analysis and then a political solution, most recently with the One Democratic State campaign. So I'd like for each one of you to talk a little bit about your own present work. So Issa, let's begin with you again. And
I focus a lot on the grassroots level, on the ground, to support the Palestinian families and to resist the Israeli occupation and Israeli settlers by organizing direct actions, sit-ins, campaigns on the ground in Hebron especially. I do a lot of legal work to try to stop the settlement expansion and to protect Palestinian houses. I do a lot of tours awareness campaigns. We do a lot of community activism, and mainly we focus in two main things. One, to keep the families stay in their homes and their land, and on the other hand, to speak about what is happening and the Israeli policies of ethnic cleansing and apartheid and occupation, and about the narrative that Palestinians exist, Palestinian nonviolence resistance exists. But mainly in the last 1 year and a half, we were in defense, to be very honest, Mike, because the situation is really hard on the people. We are facing real transfer. In the past, Israel was working hard to to transfer us but not with a visible means. But after October 7th, they used the opportunity, they used the momentum to get rid of the families from certain areas, especially Area C, H2 in Hebron, Jordan Valley, Masafer Yatta. So they want to get rid of the people from there, and they are working very hard. So I focused with other activists in my group to keep the families in their homes, to try to make it easier for them, and to speak loud about what's going on to us from the occupation. Uh, Jeff does other things, but I mainly work on the ground, and I speak to the families, I connect them together. I work with other solidarity groups from all over the world to organize campaigns to increase the cost of the Israeli occupation by doing daily actions and daily, activities. This is what I do in the ground. So I am very active with Youth Against Settlements. We train them. We have a new group of activists now. We train them about nonviolence resistance, about storytelling, about legal rights under the Israeli military apartheid law. And on the other hand, I'm very active with an organization called Friends of Hebron. We do a lot of advocacy in the US, and we try to open the eyes of the American lawmakers, the American people, and the American stakeholders, celebrities about what's going on the ground. And we, in Friends of Hebron, we support the families and we support the activists in Youth Against Settlement as well. So I do that mainly. I am very active with another organization in Germany, in Europe. It's called Artist Allies Hebron. It's to bring artists together to do artistic work to highlight the Israeli occupation, the Israeli apartheid, and the Israeli ethnic cleansing in Hebron.
Thank you, Issa. As a matter of fact, we know that in the fall you'll be doing you'll be in the U.S. for at least 6 to 8 weeks, and so those of you who would like to maybe host Issa might want to be in touch with myself or Doug Thorpe or Maya Garner or Miko Peled. We are, and others, we're all on the board of Friends of Hebron. Jeff, same question to you. Tell us about your work these days. You're muted, Jeff.
Most of you know the work of ICAHD over the years. We've been working now since 1997, so it's a long time for a resistance kind of an organization, political organization, to exist and continue to function. And some of you are on here, like Mary Lou Smith, I noticed, and others, Ken, and many of you, have been with us for many years. So we're really proud of that we've kept people together, and we're also proud of the fact, and I think this is reflected in the nomination with Issa, that we've managed over the years to keep our credibility with the Palestinians. I mean, it is not easy at a time, of political suppression that that we're going through as an Israeli organization, to be able to continue to work with Palestinians, work inside their communities, and keep that trust, and really forge, a common front. So ICAHD, as you all know, is also active on the ground, rebuilding homes, although that's become difficult over the last few years, but we do build still. We built some agricultural structures in Beit Umar not long ago to help the Palestinians stay on their land because the settlers are always trying to come in and take the land and so on. But yeah, because I'm an academic, I'm an anthropologist, I'm also able to kind of take the activism, read what's happening on the ground, and develop grounded analyses out of that that I think people find useful. And then that leads, of course, into our political work. And here's where I think I don't think Issa and I disagree, but this isn't an area that Issa has been so involved with. And that is the whole idea of a political resolution to this whole thing. ICAHD has always been political, and we've rebuilt homes. We've brought up the issue of house demolitions, not per se, but as a vehicle for exposing how the occupation works, and how the Israeli colonization works in general, so that we're committed to trying to find a political way out. And so ICAHD as a group, and myself as a co-founder, we've been involved with this Palestinian-led organization, the One Democratic State campaign. And so we're very committed to the whole idea of replacing Israel and its occupation with one democratic state of equal rights for everyone, the return of the refugees, of course. And so I think ICAHD's main focus these days, because it's much harder to be involved. That's why I admire what Issa is doing so much. It's so much harder to be involved on the ground today than it was a few years ago. So we're really trying to focus much more at this crucial time on a political resolution and pushing forward the idea of one democratic states.
Thank you both. This is another question for both of you, and Jeff, I'd like you to go first. You're nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. As you mentioned, Jeff, Issa has won the Right Livelihood Award. We'll get to that in a minute. And you've been previously nominated, Jeff, for the Nobel Peace Prize. So both of you are proponents of a nonviolent resistance to Israeli apartheid, ethnic cleansing, and their genocidal agenda. So I want you to address two things. I'd like for you to share why you're committed to nonviolence, and who or what were your influences in your adopting this set of values around nonviolence as a part of your activism.
Well, let me just say, just to complete a thought from the last question, and that is, about our activities on the ground as well. I have to say, Issa and I are connected. We've known each other for many years and have worked together, but ICAHD rebuilt a part of his Youth Against Settlements headquarters when it was demolished by the Israeli authorities. So we have a real connection from that point of view as well. To tell you the honest truth, obviously I'm for nonviolence, but that isn't the center part of my approach to all of this. I think that it's really important to be able to read not just the conflict, but to read your enemies, to read your opponents, to develop strategies. I was always, it's interesting. You're asking about the background to all of this. I'm not going to get into a lecture, and I promise you I'd be economical. But you remember the story Billy Budd,
Herman Melville
story. Billy Budd, about this shipmate, Billy Budd, who is just pure. He's only ideals. There's nothing bad about him. He can't see anything bad or evil. And so when Claggart, who's the first mate, who is evil, accuses him of mutiny, he doesn't even know how to respond, and he pushes Claggart, and Claggart falls and hits his head and dies, and and the story goes on. So that always affected me. Rollo May, back in the '60s, a famous social psychologist, wrote about it. And that is, you've got, it's important to be good. It's important to have, obviously, values and so on. But at the same time, you can't ignore evil. You can't be naive in the face of evil. And you have to develop strategies that are appropriate. So I recognize that in some situations, armed struggle, which is a right of the oppressed people, it can be appropriate. I think it's a matter of strategy. Now, obviously, I'm against killing people. I'm for nonviolence, but I think at the same time, strategies of resistance have to be able to read the situation or read your opponent well, and you don't have that luxury as an oppressed person always to decide, well, these are my moral standards, and I'm going to just stay with them. Sometimes you have to. I don't know. There's not a term for it that I can think of, but in some ways, a kind of a controlled or aware use of tactics that maybe you wouldn't want to use, that maybe violate your values to some degree. But you have to always do that evaluation between the struggle itself and what you're trying to resolve and resolving the oppression and saving the lives of yourselves, your families, your people, and so on, versus certain kinds of constraints that you might not want to do things, but you feel, look, there's in the balance, not that you would become evil, but that sometimes you would adopt strategies that you wouldn't want to adopt. So I guess what I'm trying to say is always in my thinking, the struggle and the ideals are in a kind of a dynamic tension. It isn't like, you have these set of, and then you can kind of apply them purely, like Billy
Sure.
Budd would, to a situation. And I think, that's the way I would kind of approach this issue of nonviolence.
I appreciate that, Jeff. And Issa, we're going to get to you in just a second. I ask it not so much with any kind of judgment or prior answer, because far be it from most of us who are sitting in places of privilege, right? And sitting in very safe homes and cities and, contexts. Far be it from us to dictate to people who are under genocide how they should how they should resist the genocide that's happening to them. So I really am asking because I want to learn from you all, and so I'm eager to hear Issa's response. So Issa, talk to us about your embrace of nonviolence and the influences on adopting that set of values.
I was a normal Palestinian who was working on his education. This is typical family in Palestine, that Palestinian families, the parents try to push their children to do well in their education, in their schools and universities. And for us, getting a degree from the occupation is resistance, is a kind of steadfastness and sumud, that we get an educational degree in spite of the Israeli occupation obstacles and Israeli occupation oppression and miserable life. So for a Palestinian family, they try to resist by, staying in their homes. They try to resist by going to their schools. They try to resist by going to their universities, going to their work, to farm their land. So to remain is a resistance. So we say active existence is resistance for us. So non-violence resistance for the families, it's part of the family daily life, to stay and remain, and in spite of the soldiers' violence, the army aggression, the settler terror, and in spite of everything they do to you, you stay, you remain strong, firm as an olive tree. And the olive tree for us is the symbol of sumud, that it's green all year in spite of the weather. Is it hot or cold, winter or summer, spring, autumn? So the olive tree is there, and this is what Palestinians want. Me personally, I was not political at all. I was only taking my education very serious until I got into the university to study engineering. So I'm a engineer. For me, everything is a system: input, processor, output, feedback, and reduce the disturbance on the system, and how to make the system efficient. Until the last year, Mike, in my university, and the last semester, the Israeli occupation closed my university. If they didn't close my university, I don't think I'm become an activist. That's the situation, that the army forced me to resist the closure of my university. So I had to go back to house broken. I was ready to do anything against the occupation, from violence to anything else. But I was lucky that when I searched about how to make a revolution to get my education, it was not about occupation. Because for us, you fight to get electricity, you fight to get water, you fight to get food. You know, it's not a fight. Why? Because the occupation, since very long time, is working to make our life harder and miserable, to force us leave. So I searched on Yahoo, not Google, how to make a revolution. Luckily, what came out first to me was the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa, the civil rights movement in the US, and Martin Luther King and all his friends, about Gandhi. So I started searching about them, how they made a campaign to win what they want. And I was so inspired about them. I didn't hear about them before. Then I moved a little bit and I found Gene Sharp a book about the tactics of and ideas of non-violence campaigning, and what to do this and what to do that. But it's all not part of our Muslim culture. So I searched more. I found another very famous non-violence leader. His name Bacha Khan. He's Pakistani. He was active with Gandhi. So he was acting as a non-violence activist and getting that power from his religion, from Islam. So I went back to the students. I talked to them about it. They liked the idea. We managed in a few months to reopen the university against the Israeli military well. And I graduated as an activist and as an engineer. And by time I said, trying to mix what I read here, what I read there, to the point I reached my own philosophy of non-violence and of resistance and campaigning and how to make the occupation costly. Then I went back to the Palestinian history of non-violence. I found out that Palestinian history is very rich of many non-violence initiatives. One of them is the first Intifada. It was not famous because of the social media and all what the people were doing. But when I started searching in my community, I found that, wow, women had a role, the children had a role, everybody had a role, the elders, the strikes, protests, campaigns, sumud, so non-violence resistance was in the first Intifada. Then I went a little bit back to Beit Sahur and to the civil rights movement there, when they, started boycotting the Israeli products and they burned the Israeli occupation IDs, and there is a film talks about that. It's called Wanted 18, about the cows. So it's really I like it and I always recommend it. And Mubarak Awad, the leadership of that. So, and then I went back a little bit more to the 30s against the British mandate with the longest strike, against the Israeli, the British mandate. That's really very rich of our resistance and very rich of our history and our traditions. And we all can have a role and we do it well. And we live it and we do it, but we need to little bit frame it and make people aware of what they are doing.
Thank you, Issa. I'm going to follow up with you, Issa. I'm going to ask each one of you now a couple of questions on your own. Uh, Issa, a week and a half ago, the film No Other Land won the Academy Award for Best Documentary here. It tells the story of the ethnic cleansing of Masafer Yatta in the South Hebron Hills. I think you know some of these people, right? Tell us your thoughts on the recognition of the film, but even more, can you share with us what's happening in Masafer Yatta today and throughout the South Hebron Hills today?
Masafer Yatta is a Palestinian famous area. It's very beautiful area, and the Israeli military is working to evict the Palestinian families from their homes. And it's Bedouins, farmers, villages, and the Israeli military in the last 25 years, since the beginning of the the second Intifada, they worked hard to make it harder. They started in 1967 to take them out, but after the second Intifada, they worked to take out around 12 communities from their homes and make it settlements. It's the area between Hebron and the Dead Sea. So they want to take all that land from Hebron to Jordan. So we don't have any future continuity for the state of Palestine. You know, all the eastern part of Palestine, from Masafer Yatta to the eastern part of Bethlehem to Jordan Valley, all that to Bath, all that part and the Dead Sea, they want to take it over. And they worked hard, you know, settler violence, pogroms, where the families, they attack them. And I remember them because after I finished my university, 2003, I became a full-time activist. So one of the areas I became activist in was Masafer Yatta. So from a Palestinian family in a village called Gawawis, very close to Susia, it's before Susia to the left, the Israeli Supreme Court just decided for the Palestinian villagers in that village to go back to their homes. But whenever they try to go back to their homes, they used to be attacked by the Israeli settlers and the Israeli soldiers. So I had to go there with other international and Israeli activists, and we stayed with them for a few months to bring them back. Now, Gawawis is there. It's one of the best villages. It had the headquarters of amazing organization called Commit Me, which gives electricity and renewable energy to the Palestinian families who don't have electricity because of the occupation. So that's Masafer Yatta. And by time, they work harder and harder and harder on them. So they have no water, no enough electricity, no roads, house demolition, tents demolition. They go after their sheep. So it's a front line. And they tried, for example, 2019, 2018, to destroy Susia, another famous village in that
Yeah.
area. And a new generation, their fathers were not that active. They were one, two, three fathers were active. The new generation, as Basil Adra and Hamdan and Nasser Nawash'a and Fatme and Sami Horeini and Tariq Hadalin and all of them, they went to universities, they learn, they become fluent in English, they become good activists, and they start leading the defense campaign against the Israeli occupation and the Israeli settlers. And they are the front line. And they used to be arrested, detained, intimidated. And who is helping them and who's in solidarity with them? Many Israeli activists who share, as Jeff and other Israeli activists, who see us as human beings, as Palestinians, and who believe in the Palestinian rights. We call it joint non-violence struggle. We are very proud of this joint non-violence struggle. ICAHD helped me to rebuild Youth Against Settlements headquarters. And now it's the most important house in Hebron. It's the non-violence activist house. I live there. Now it's my permanent house and permanent address, and everybody comes to that house. It's from ICAHD, Israeli organization. B'Tselem, Yeshdin, Breaking the Silence, many other organizations, many Jewish organizations from the US. They do great work to help the Palestinian families, and it's not normalization because they are not to try to show that the occupation is normal. They are not trying to make us coexist with the occupation. You know, they have different views. Maybe some Jets they believe in one state solution, which is great solution, and others they believe in the two-state solution according to the international law, according to the peace agreement between Israel and Palestine. But for us, it's not now about the solution. It's about that we want to keep the families, to remain in the land and to remain in the ground. And someone as Jeff can really go around and make solution possible, and other people can help us to do so. So the film came out as a fruit of this joint struggle with Yoval and Rachel and Ezra Nawi. He passed away, but he's one of the best activists. Amiel Vardi is living there. They are dedicating all their time, all their energy to remain. And Ezra Nawi, or Masafer Yatta, is an Israeli activist. He dedicated all his life to help the Palestinians. And we are not trying to say that it's coexistence. We are not trying to say that we are equal. Not at all. There is no normalization here. There is, it's about increasing and strengthening the Palestinian to work together in that way. So Northern Land is a great film, is a very great film. It was a shame to be attacked by, I don't know who did that big damage to our movement to attack a film. It's not about winning Oscar, Mike. Even if it didn't win Oscar, the film tells the story of Palestinian nonviolent resistance, Palestinian Sumud. It tells the story of the occupation. It tells the story of the ethnic cleansing. If it's with Israelis, it's okay. If the Israeli activists they come to us and they want to join our struggle, they are more than welcome. And we know, we decided to invite them. We are thinkers. We know what are we doing. I don't want anybody to think for me when I am in the ground facing Israeli settlers, facing Israeli soldiers, and facing death every day, facing torture, facing, to be beaten, to be detained, to be arrested. So I know what is right for my people. And I think that it was very bad idea to write one word against Yoval and Rahel that they are in the films. In the contrary, they are an add value for the film.
Thank you so much, Issa. We really appreciate your perspective, not only on the film, but your sharing about what's happening in Masafer Yatta and the real injustice and the criminality that's taking place on the ground there. Jeff, I've known you for more than 20 years now. And ever since I've known you, you've said that we need to change the framework of our understanding beyond the idea of a conflict. And of course, most of us on the call have done that. But also, in addition to a human rights approach, you've really emphasized for your career, really, a political approach, a political analysis, and a political solution. The title of your latest book gives kind of the story, right? Decolonizing Israel, liberating Palestine. Tell us what you mean by this political analysis, a political approach, a political solution, and why that's so important for us to hear, even beyond what most of us, of course, yourself included, embrace as a human rights understanding.
Well, I mean, human rights and protest and resistance and education and lobbying and campaigning are all key elements to any kind of a political movement. But in the end, there has to be a political program. And, the Palestinians got it right at the beginning, even from the beginning of Zionism, that they're facing a colonial a colonial enterprise, a settler colonial enterprise whose purpose is to Judaize their country, to transform an Arab country into a Jewish country. Uh, and they realized that, and that was true all the way through with the founding of the PLO. Their charter reflected that. The idea of liberation, we have to liberate ourselves. It's not a conflict in that there are somehow two roughly symmetrical sides, each one having some legitimacy, and now we have to work it out. No. A colonial struggle is much different from that, and there is no moral justification for colonization. It has to be ended, and you have to have a process of decolonization, which is dismantling all the structures of domination and control. And so, the PLO, I think the Palestinians understood that, but in the practicalities of trying to salvage something, they were convinced by Clinton, by other political forces that they should abandon the anti-colonial struggle and go back to the idea of a conflict and the two-state idea. The two-state idea is based on this idea of somehow we can compromise, we can negotiate, and so on, that I don't believe is true. Certainly with a two-state solution, the refugees can never come back, for example. You never dismantle the power differential between Israel and any kind of a Palestinian Bantustan that would emerge. And I think the PLO paid the price in Oslo and afterwards, and we see it today. Nothing happened except a strengthening of the settler colonial enterprise to a point where there is not only no two-state solution, that there never was, but we're faced with a stark alternative between apartheid, which is the only place where Israel can go. They're stuck with 7 million Palestinians, and to whom they can't give citizenship to, because then it wouldn't be a Jewish state. And so apartheid is their only way out, or one state, an inclusive state of equal citizenship that replaces Israel and its occupation. So the problem is that, of course, part of this the Oslo process was really to dismantle the Palestinian liberation movement. The PLO was dismantled by Arafat. So there is no more liberation organization. There is no more vehicle that brings together all the scattered fragments of the Palestinian people. There is no political program that's emerged since then. And in a way, because of the repression, both of Israel and of the Palestinian Authority, it's very hard for Palestinians even to come together to talk about a political program. And you can't be in a political struggle without a political program. And so it's in the last couple of years, since we started the One Democratic State campaign, we forged a 10-point political program that you can see on our website, which is onestatecampaign.org, that I think is significant because it's the first time an actual anti-colonial liberation political program that details what it means to decolonize and gives a vision of what a post-colonial future would look like, and talks about how one state would actually work, that's been done over the years. So I think we're in a process now, it's late in the game, of coming back to the original Palestinian understanding that they're confronting a colonial regime, a colonial project, and we have to decolonize. And so I think ICAHD has been very much a part of that process. But just to answer your point, I think because of the lack of a political program, because a Palestinian leadership has been suppressed, Israel and the PA target, everybody asks, you've heard this 100 times, where's the Palestinian Mandela? Well, he or she is either dead or in prison. So everyone that a potential leader from the age of 12, every Palestinian is targeted either by Israel or by the PA. And so, it's been very hard for them to develop a leadership. And, we're part of hopefully part of that process of helping to give a certain amount of protection, because I don't think it's patronage to have Israelis involved, and it's certainly not normalization. In an anti-colonial struggle, you don't have normalization from that point of view. We're all comrades in the struggle against colonialism, but at the same time, I think part of our role is to say things, do things. For just one little example, and I'll shut up. When houses are being demolished, I can get in front of a bulldozer and do my my resistance thing in front of the bulldozer and so on. If a Palestinian would do that, they'd shoot him. Well, it's the same thing in the political realm. We can say things and do things. I can go out on speaking tours. I can put up on Facebook posts. I can say things that Issa can't say. And so, we're trying to use that privilege we have to push this anti-colonial program. So by being political, what I mean is, and I don't blame anybody, but in the absence of a political program, we're really kind of paralyzed. And so we have to work together to to go beyond what we're doing, the protests and the even the resistance on the ground to some degree, and the lobbying and everything we're doing is good, but it has to be put within some kind of a political program that has to be articulated by Palestinians. So we're in this transition process. It's very difficult and it's very urgent because Trump and Netanyahu are trying to nail down Israeli apartheid through this normalization process. So it's time to get political, and we're trying to be political and work with the Palestinians to develop this political program that is today the missing piece in our struggle.
You even with all of that, Jeff, you also like to emphasize that the One Democratic State campaign is not an ICAHD program, it's Palestinian led, and that you work very closely with your Palestinian partners in this program, this campaign.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. And that's why I'm trying to say, that, we're comrades in a common struggle of liberation and anti-colonialism. This doesn't break down to like it would in a conflict or in a two-state solution of an us and them. There is
Yeah.
no us and them. We're together in this struggle. And I think that's reflected in the nomination of Issa and I.
I have this question's for both of you, and Issa, I'm going to ask you first. So as we gather here today, the Israeli government has openly said that it's violating, I mean, open about it, right? It's violating its agreement with Hamas and will not enter stage 2 of the ceasefire. It's closed all the crossings into Gaza, halting all humanitarian aid. It's going to continue its genocide through starvation, freezing in the winter cold, disease, unless Hamas hands over Israeli captives, while still, however, leaving Israel free to continue with its military operations and genocide, not only in Gaza, but in the West Bank. And of course, all of this is supported by the U.S. It's open the gates of hell threat and the ultimate goal of ethnically cleansing all the Palestinians from Gaza. So that's a big question, but this is happening as we speak here today, the violation of the ceasefire agreement and all the rest. And I'd like to get your comments, Issa, and then yours, Jeff.
Okay, this is a very good question. So Israel wants the hostages to come back. So if all the Israeli hostages came back to Israel, if Hamas disappears completely, and any Palestinian, political leader, me, Jeff, everybody, we all disappear, will Palestinians have peace?
We know the answer, right? We know
No.
the answer. Yeah.
No. We are not the problem. We, the Palestinians, are not the problem. Regardless of what we do, the occupation is going on to build more settlements, to take more land, to transfer the Palestinians. They didn't talk about transferring Hamas outside Gaza. They said they want to transfer 2 million Palestinians. So that's Israel. And they want to transfer the Palestinians from Hebron as well. And they're working on it since 1948. It's not new. For us, that transfer is not after October 7th. Our history didn't start on October 7th. 800,000 Palestinians were transferred from their homes. Hamas didn't exist. PLO didn't exist. BA didn't exist. Fatah didn't exist. Palestinian violence didn't exist. 1967, we were expelled from our houses when they occupied the rest of Palestine. And with all that history of working to push Palestinians away from their homes, from their land, what is that? It's as Jeff called it, they are colonizers. They remove Palestinians and bring settlers to live with them with colonizers' mentality. It's a kind of investment. It's a financial investment for them. Free land, you build houses and you sell houses to colonizers. This is the situation. So bring the hostages back. Israel didn't follow the Oslo peace agreement. Oslo. Hebron redeployment agreement, Israel didn't respect it since day one. So in Hebron redeployment agreement, which was signed by Netanyahu government 1997 and the Palestinian Authority, it says that Israel has to reopen Shuhada Street for Palestinian vehicles. It's closed for Palestinians to walk now. In the agreement, it says that Israel has to protect the Palestinian identity of H2. It's now Israeli identity. You only see blue and white flags and signs.
Yeah.
We don't exist in our own city now. And West Bank, what about West Bank? Gaza is Hamas, October 7th. What about Kalkilia? What about Jenin? What about Nablus? What about Hebron? What about Ramallah? What about South Mount Hebron? What about Masafer Yatta? What about Jordan Valley? Is it because of Hamas? Is Smotrich calling to transfer Palestinians from the river to the sea because of Hamas? It's an excuse. They always lie, and they find some crazy Americans, listen to them, and support them with their money and political support and cultural support and backup. The problem is the American blind support to this catastrophe. So without the American money, without the American political backup, we don't have occupation in Palestine.
Yeah, thank you for
And
that,
we
Issa.
all saw how they all came together after October 7th, which
Yeah.
we say that we are against violence. We didn't want to see Israeli civilians to be kidnapped. We didn't want to see the Israeli civilians to be killed at all. It's not part of our culture.
Thank you, Issa. Jeff, your thoughts?
Well, again, I go back to this idea of settler colonialism. I mean, in a way, everybody here is plugged into that. I think I think the difference between what we're trying to do politically as ICAHD and activism, I mean, we do activism too on the ground, is that the activism is very reactive, and you react to events, including Gaza, but other, any other event as well. Whereas in a political analysis, you have an analysis. It's like a doctor that has a diagnosis. Before you prescribe the medicine, you have to know what the illness is. And if you're prescribing a medicine for a conflict that in fact is a settler colonial disease, or the other way around, the patient's going to die. It's not, there has to be a connection between what the issue is and what the solution is. And that's what we've always been trying to do in ICAHD, is to help people have the bigger picture, the content, the context, what exactly is the issue. So we all use the term settler colonialism, but we don't always understand it because it's an academic concept that's very, very complex. And so what we're trying to do is not only use that conflict, but to show, I did today my monthly update that's on Facebook, to really try to put what's happening on the ground, all these events that are happening within this conceptual framework of settler colonialism, so we understand the process. And I mean, it's very complex, but there's three basic elements in settler colonialism. One in Zionism, let's take Zionism as an example, the Judaization of Palestine. The very purpose of Zionism is to Judaize Palestine. Well, once you understand that, you understand there's no two-state solution. Arafat did know that, should have known it better, in that it is a colonial struggle because it's not one side against another. It's a colonial entity that's trying to Judaize, to erase Palestine and transform it into a Jewish country. And then, of course, so that's going on. As Issa just said, these land expropriations and the driving Palestinians off their land, like the film showed as well, is happening today. It's not a linear thing. All these things happen. And the second element, of course, is pacification. Pacification meaning the suppression of resistance to a point where there is no more resistance. And that's a precondition to the way it all ends is through normalization. You normalize the settler colonial project, in this case, apartheid over all of Palestine. Well, the pacification obviously is happening in Gaza, but you have the Gazification, which is an Israeli term, of the West Bank, especially the northern West Bank, to destroy any last vestiges of resistance. And then you've got the pacification, of the Palestinians. Really, I think they're going to replicate what Sharon did in 2002, an entire attack on Palestinian cities that was called Operation Defensive Shield at that time. And then, of course, as Issa's living it, the ethnic cleansing then of large portions of the West Bank. So in the end, you've got a Palestinian Bantustan on 15% of the territory. So if you have this concept of settler colonialism and you see how it acts by taking the land, displacing the people, pacifying the resistance, and then normalizing it all, with the Arab government's complicity in all of this, then you understand the process. And then our task is, all right, where are we in that process? You see, and so you can take the events, and that's, I think, what ICAHD tries to do. We take the events of the day, what's happening in Hebron, what's happening in Gaza, what's happening with the Abraham Accords, and so on, and then you can put it within this framework, and people can evaluate where we are, and then what has to be done. And so that's why we're initiating now what we call this campaign against normalizing Israeli apartheid, because we're right at the cusp of this project being ended. If Trump and Netanyahu and MBS in Saudi Arabia have their way in the next few months, this is over. It will be normalized. And normalization, it's not a very dramatic term. It's hard to get people out in the streets over normalization, but it's a very powerful thing, because if you think about it, normalizing is normalizing. There is no more political space after normalization. Your normalization will be apartheid. Palestinians will then come back and say, okay, well, what about our rights? And the answer is going to be, hey, we've moved on. This is normalized. There's an agreement. And so this is really where we are. We have to focus on this. The problem is, and this is what I talk about in my March update, is that there's a disconnect between what's happening here and all the international organizations that are working to support the Palestinians, because they're not in contact with the Palestinians very much. There is no forum, there's no channel in which I can talk to the leaders of, let's say, the PSC in London, the US campaign in Washington, JVP in New York, all kinds of groups. There is no forum. And so every group has its own turf, every group has its own budget, every group has its own staff, every group has its own agenda. And without any, and so in a way, their campaigns go on. I see this in BDS as well. Their campaigns go on without any relation to what's actually happening on the ground or what this process of settler colonialism is. And we're trying, and it's not easy by any means. And there has to be much more Palestinian involvement in this, trying to seize the leadership and to bring some coordination into this worldwide movement. I think people are mobilized around Palestinians, but they don't know exactly what to do. And that's where the political program comes in, Palestinian leadership comes in, and the use of concepts like settler colonialism so that we know exactly where we are in the struggle. So, yeah, so all of that is the relationship between what's happening on the ground and this and developing an effective political anti-colonial movement to oppose it.
So Jeff and Issa, I'm aware of the time, and I've still got a couple questions yet that I want you to address. So I'm going to ask you to be economical with your answers. But as a reminder, I just want to remind everyone that this webinar is being sponsored by the Indiana Center for Middle East Peace, the Friends of Hebron, and ICAHD. And we're appreciative of these organizations for hosting the webinar. So Jeff and Issa, you both mentioned that the United States is a problem, and I mean, a problem is the nicest word that I can choose to describe, right? I mean, we're criminally complicit. But we do have guests from all around the world on this call here. And so I want you to, I have a couple of questions for you, and they're connected. Talk to us about your friends and supporters from around the world. I know Ireland has been a close friend. I know friends in Scandinavia. There's friends in the UK and other places around the world. So talk to us about your friends in other countries. And then I want to I want to ask you about South Africa in particular and the two court cases. On the one hand, the ICC and ICJ rulings are important. On the other hand, things seem to be getting worse on the ground. And so I want you to talk a little bit about the court cases declaring a genocide in that Israel's what Israel's doing amounts to a genocide, the importance of the court cases, but also what do we do beyond the court cases to affect change. So Jeff first, and then Issa, and please let's be as economical as possible with our answers.
You know how economical I am.
Yeah, of course.
I'm the Adam Smith of political discussions. Look, you know, we all know that there's a wonderful architecture of international law. You know, what Biden used to call the rules-based international system that was so hypocritical that I think even he was laughing under his collar. You know, there's a whole corpus of international law. You have the whole UN Charter, the UN system. You have the ICJ, you have the ICC. All of that is in place. The problem is, of course, enforcement, because it all goes through the United Nations Security Council. It all faces the veto of the United States and the other five. And therefore, it really is, you know, it's simply, you know, ideal. You know, it's an idealized thing that has no actual political force in you know, in the world, international law. You know, so you know, this is an issue. I'm not going to get into it, but I think there's a bigger issue. I talk about global Palestine a lot because I think beyond Palestine itself, I think Palestine is kind of the microcosm of global struggles all over. And, the problem is now, especially with Trump, but Biden was a part of it, and I think it's going to be in the future, the dominant element of international politics is this idea of transactionalism, that everything is a deal. There is no value, there are no ideals, there are no principles, there are no allies. Human rights, international law is silly. Look what even Trump has done to Netanyahu. Pulled the rug out from under him by going to talk to Hamas, because Trump doesn't care who Hamas is. He just wants a deal so he can get the Nobel Peace Prize for himself. So, our dilemma is, how do we actually cope politically in that kind of a world in which we have no leverage? It used to be a few years ago that, there were different systems. There was a socialist system, there was a Soviet Union, there was the United States. Today you have BRICS, which is much more difficult to deal with because they're all pretty much authoritarian state capitalist systems themselves, not a great alternative. But, maybe we can work with BRICS to some degree, a little bit. But otherwise, there are no countervailing forces. You can't invoke international law, you can't invoke idealism or values. We don't have, the counter institutions we have, like the ICJ and the UN, are neutralized, and everything is simply a deal. And I think Europe is discovering that. They've, over the Ukraine and the tariffs and all of that. So really our question, and this is our challenge, is how do we mount an effective political struggle, with powers that be that just, if you forgive my language, it's the only way to say it, they don't give a shit. They don't care about the value. They don't care about the laws. Everything is just thrown out the window. And so it really makes it, I think this is a place where we should all be thinking together, and we should go beyond our silos. Everybody here is a Palestine wonk. I mean, in each of your communities, all the people that are here, you've got thousands of activists and people involved. Where are they? Where are the climate change people? Where are the women's rights people? Where are the third world debt people? Where are we're all siloed, and yet we're all facing the same issue. And that is, how do we move a progressive agenda ahead and even save the planet in a world that's all transactional? So I think we should be leveraging to some degree the Palestinian struggle and what we're learning and how we're trying to cope with it into an international conversation, and begin to learn from other groups in other issues that we're not in contact, how they're dealing with that, and try to create for ourselves some kind of a counter movement that can effectively deal with a transactional international system. I mean, that's kind of a highfalutin way to sort of end this, but I think that this is really the challenge, not only facing Palestinians, but facing all of us.
Thank you, Jeff. Issa? Issa, are you still with us?
Yes, I am with you.
Good. Yes, please.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. We know that the United States is a problem. We're criminally complicit in this genocide and ethnic cleansing. But Palestinians also have friends all around the world. So say a word about other allies you have, and also say a word about the ICC and ICJ rulings and your views on how helpful those might be. But also, even with these rulings, things aren't changing on the ground except for the worse. So talk a little bit about the complexity of those international law rulings, as well as your allies.
International law is a tool. It's a very important tool to use to increase the cost of the Israeli occupation. So the ICC, the ICJ ruling is very, very important, because Israel is lying to everybody on earth that it's not only democracy in the Middle East, it has a moral army, it's civilized people against the uncivilized, who are the Palestinians, we are human animals. Now Israel accused of genocide. This is a big achievement. never happened in the past. A Western country in the current history accused of genocide is something very, very important. And with the ICC, that a Western country, after Russia, which everybody considers that it doesn't have the human rights values and all the state of law, that Israel Prime Minister has an arrest warrant against him for being accused of a war crime. So really, it helps. And we are in defense, Mike. We defend our land. If we don't have this mechanism, what the situation will be in the ground? Much, much, much worse. So we are in defense. We defend ourselves. We defend our rights. We try to use the international law to make them be afraid of it. After the ICC ruling of issuing an arrest order to Netanyahu, many settlers stopped doing interviews. They don't do interviews, the majority of the settler leaders. So they are afraid. They really care about the ICJ ruling and the ICC and about the UN. They try to play that they don't care to make us not use that very important international law mechanism. But we need more friends and supporters to create more public opinion to support the ICC and the ICJ and make it hard for their countries, their official leaders, to do double standards. So if Netanyahu comes to Germany, in spite that he's summoned to the ICC, I think German friends and supporters should make it costly for their governments to allow it. The same with any other country in Europe, even in the US. And to be very honest, Mike, I am an example. I'm a case study. Without the international support, protection mechanism, and without my solidarity friends and the solidarity, friends all over the world, I will not exist. They would get rid of me long time ago. When in October 7th, they kidnapped me and tortured me, I think they were planning to kill me too. What made them not to do so? The campaign to make it widely, costly on the occupation. So really, we are in defense. We thank deeply all the solidarity groups, all the activists. Everybody is doing something for Palestine. They are writing their names in the right side of history.
Thank you, Issa. I want to let Issa and Jeff have the final word, but before I do, I just want to remind you all that a recording of this webinar will be posted on our Indiana Center for Middle East Peace YouTube channel and on the ICAHD YouTube channel and website in the next couple of days. Also, a reminder that tomorrow, Thursday at 12 noon Eastern Time, I'll be interviewing the other Nobel Peace Prize nominee from Palestine, Mazen Kumsiya, from the Palestine Natural History Museum and Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability in Bethlehem. That's 12 noon tomorrow, Thursday, Eastern Time. So, parting words. Issa, you mentioned how much this Nobel Peace Prize nomination in some and your other recognitions protects you, and it also gives you a platform. You want to address that, and then anything else you'd like to say to us?
Yes, the Palestinians are stereotyped as terrorists, and they try to shut off our voices. The Israeli occupation works very, very hard to shut off our voices and make us not reach you, not reach the international media, and not reach outside Palestine. Even inside Palestine, they don't want us to talk. So the military system, non-violence resistance is not allowed. What I'm doing is not legal in the Israeli military system, but with the international protection, with the international awareness, with the international media awareness, with the international social media awareness, all of that is really important to me and to other activists to Susia, to Masafariata, to Basel, to Jordan Valley, so everywhere. Your work as an activist is making difference in the ground. We see it, we feel it. You know, the soldiers to each other. He's filming, be careful. He's filming means that you will see what they do. So they're afraid. They're very afraid that we give you these video materials and it will be shown everywhere. They're very afraid of media. They're very afraid of social media. So finally, Mike, this is something very important to me. I want to thank you, all the activists all over the world. They are making a huge difference. And in Palestine, we felt it after the war. We felt your important work on the ground. And be very smart how to make the occupation costly. This is something very important. Be smart how to make the occupation costly. Do concrete actions and visible actions to make the occupation costly, to make apartheid known to everybody. Israel is labeled as an apartheid state and it's accused of genocide. If we manage to convince people all over the world, a lot of people will stop their blind support to Israeli occupation, and many governments will stop their backup and support to the Israeli occupation. And that's the time when we can achieve peace. With this blind support, we will never achieve peace. So there is an important role on everybody who's supporting Palestine, on the international community, to really make the occupation costly and to make Israel pay the price for its settlements, for its violation to the international law. That means the start to make peace with the Palestinians. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Issa. Jeff?
Well, I'm looking forward to using this platform, the joint nomination with Issa. Issa and I are going to Norway in April, and hopefully we'll be, presenting together and working together in the future. So I look forward to that. But again, Issa and I are both connected to international networks. I mean, all of you know us, and we know you, and we go abroad. But there's hundreds of Palestinian activists and leaders and so on the ground that aren't known. So I think it's important for groups abroad, with our help maybe, to expand the voices of Palestinians that are heard, that are invited into webinars. And I think we should work, and this is just to finish what I was saying before. There used to be, there is a European Coordinating Committee on Palestine, the ECCP. It sits in Brussels. ICAHD UK is a part of it. But there should be a coordinating committee in every continent, the North American one, the Latin American one, and so on. But there used to be, 30 years ago, an international coordinating committee on Palestine that sat in Geneva. Kathy Bergen, many of you know Kathy, was the head of it, actually. Don Betts was very involved with it, and so on. And I think this is a time when we have to start reconstituting an international coordinating committee on Palestine in order to not only to identify young Palestinian leaders, especially in the young generation, and they're there certainly, but to also to then bring them into this network that only a few people like Issa and I are really a part of today. And at the same time, take all of you and your groups and tighten your ties to Palestinians here and their Israeli comrades like me, so that your agendas and your actions and your priorities are really more in tune with what's needed here in a political sense. So I think we should all think together in our different organizations and networks about how can we come together as a kind of an international coordinating committee on Palestine, or at least, if you're in North America, a North American committee that we can play. Because today, for example, we have this campaign that we want to launch. Issa has his activities, but we just kind of throw it out there. There isn't any forum or hub or framework in which we can coordinate with all the different groups and plan together. I think that is a really key thing. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you for having us.
Well, I think I speak on behalf of all of us who are on here this morning that we're grateful for our friendship with you, Jeff, and with you, Issa. We're grateful for the work that you do. We, in our own ways, stand with you. And I know I want to second what Issa said and what you indicated, Jeff, that we want to say thanks to all of the people who've been on the call today for their activism in their own worlds. So with that, thanks everyone for joining us today. We thank you, Issa. We thank you, Jeff, for this time together, and we wish you all the best. And we pledge to you our own solidarity in the days and weeks to come. Thanks everyone for joining us today.
Thank
Bye
you.
now.
Thanks.